Okay, so my job, my assignment is to talk about. Are we doing okay with the sound and everything? Okay, good. Talk about prophecy, today and on. But we're going to backtrack. I got to backtrack actually quite a bit. So I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that, but I just kind of want to lay a foundation. I may see things a little differently. So, but one thing I like in Question Book 531. Brother also mentions that you really can. He says, God's word, things in God's word that are prophetical are difficult to understand in detail until they have been or are in process of fulfillment. I think everybody's aware of that. But we'd like to go back to 1799. In 1799, I think we're all aware that Napoleon throws the Pope in prison. And this really wasn't so much a religious reformation. It was more of a civil reformation that showed that he had no civil power. And because he had no civil power, Napoleon could just take this guy, toss him in prison, eventually he'd die. And regardless what the Pope said, that showed he had no power with God either. He was not representing God in any way, shape, or form. So this was a huge wake-up call. And this really corresponds to when Elijah in 1 Kings 20, verse 14, he did, I think I got the citation wrong, but Elijah is defeating the priests of Baal. So then rain comes. We know the rain after this defeat, this drought is over. We have the Bible societies, 1804 and on. And these two witnesses from Revelation 11:3, now these two witnesses, they have the power to speak. The scriptures themselves are now being made available to people, which is an amazing thing. And millions of people are now reading the Bible as those are being disseminated. And some of them were beginning to question the Orthodox doctrines. And and I appreciate some of the things that, many of the things that Brother David said about this. But if you go back to William Miller, we realize he was looking for the Lord's return. He was, the Lord overruled, he didn't look at the proper scriptures. He was looking at the 2,300 days. That doesn't have to do with the Lord's return. It has to do with the cleansing of the sanctuary. In Daniel 8:14, until 2,314 days, then the sanctuary be cleansed. Well, cleansed from what? When you clean something, you get rid of the bad stuff, so you can make way for the good stuff, right? Well, this was a very significant movement. He was off by 3 years. Actually, 2,300 days ended in 1846. But the work that he was supposed to do got done. This was very prominent in the United States and Canada and Great Britain, and he was cleansing. He was pointing out these errors that Orthodoxy had had for a long, long time. For instance, the Lord's return was to bring life. I mean, the apostles knew that. That's one reason why they wanted to know about the Lord's return. When are we going to have life again? So if the Lord's return is to bring life, that means you must not have an immortal soul. Bing. There's a big gong to the Orthodox doctrines, no immortal soul. Also, he's going to return to set up a kingdom. Well, that tells you the Gentile kings, that's not God's kingdom. Wow. He also brought life to the continual sacrifice. Christ died once for all. Tells you the Mass, killing him, 1,000 times every day. That's ridiculous. That's just absolutely wrong. So what was happening is people started reading the Bible. They were cutting out the middleman. They said, we're going right to the Bible and to folks who can teach us. We don't have to learn directly from the minister who's gone through seminary or whatnot. We can read the scriptures ourselves. Well, this was originally promoted, but pretty soon a lot of the clergymen thought, well, what do they need us for? We got to get control of this. So in response to this Miller movement, Brother Russell in the 1912 foreword, he says that if everyone continued to study the Bible individually, time would come when each one would have an individual doctrine. We're losing power, so they had to have a union of Protestants, and they did. This was the Evangelical Alliance. So, and I found a really nice reference on this. It was this was August of 1846. But there was a fellow named John Ewing who wrote this book of the 100-year anniversary of this, about the 100 years of the Evangelical Alliance. He said they wanted to form a confederation, and with the basis of it being their great evangelical principles, which would directly contradict everything that Brother Miller was saying, and say, let's get back. So that was very interesting. Here's the doctrinal basis. I don't know if you ever read the Constitution of the Evangelical Alliance. Now, we'll just read a few. One of them says, the right and duty of private judgment in interpretation of the Holy Scriptures. So that was more or less politically correct. Well, let everybody think what they want. But here's what they must think. Number 3 is the Trinity. Number 5 is the incarnation of the Son of God. And for what that really means is God incarnate. In other words, it's really God, but he's wearing a human suit. Jesus was just God in a human suit. If you saw the Men in Black, here's this bug wearing this Edgar suit. That's kind of what reincarnation, or what incarnation of God is meant to be. The immortality of the soul, eternal punishment, and then the last one, very, very important, the divine institution of the Christian ministry. In other words, those clergymen, they're given to you by God. You cannot do without them. And you have the obligation and perpetuity of the ordinances of baptism and the Lord's Supper. And what that really meant was if you're going to be baptized, your kids are going to be baptized, or you're going to have the Lord's Supper, you need a clergyman to do this for you. So what were they doing? They're creating an image of the beast. They're doing exactly what the Catholic Church was doing. In reprint 5349, Brother Russell talks about the two-horned beast was the church of the nation of Great Britain, the church nation of Great Britain. And the two-horned beast had power to give life to the image of the beast. Well, the Evangelical Alliance was 1846, and the Church of England and Ireland existed between 1801 and 1871. After that, they're no longer together. It's no longer the two-horned beast. Well, during that time, Revelation 13:11, and this is another beast coming up out of the earth, the established religious society, had 2 horns, England and Ireland, like a lamb, so it was like a church, but he spake like a dragon, but it had civil power. It's a church with civil power. So that's what this was. Well, in the Evangelical Alliance, 800 evangelical leaders, men from 11 countries, 52 Christian denominations, 4,000 people attended, 15,000 couldn't get in. But this was a big, big, big event. They wanted to get control again of Christian doctrine. And amongst the attendees, the names I have here, but the Church of England and Church of Ireland, they attended. And I appreciate Brother Russell saying about this. He says the Protestant clergy, they wanted the same things as papacy. They wanted power again. And in Revelation 13:15, this two-horned beast had power to give life to the image of the beast so that it could both speak and cause that many who would not worship the image of the beast would be killed. So speak. They're the ones who are establishing doctrine. If you don't agree with this, you'll be killed. Not literally, but spiritually. You can't serve in some way. So no man could buy or sell unless they had this mark of the beast. They had the ideology of the image of the beast or the beast itself. They couldn't buy or sell. They couldn't preach. They couldn't represent Christianity in any way. So this idea of this forehead sealing of intellectual understanding, Brother Russell mentions on page 165 of the 3rd volume. This was the mental comprehension of truth will be the mark or seal which will separate the forehead sealing, the proper forehead sealing will separate or distinguish the servants of God from the servants and votaries of Babylon. So if ones who have this forehead sealing of the truth, that will show that they're quite different from all the votaries of Babylon. Well, when you look at what Brother Miller did, his movement did its work. It pointed out long-held errors. It recovered many truths. It promoted a deep study of the Bible, and it established a heritage of deep Bible study, a heritage of it. That reduced dependence on the clergy. They essentially cut out the middleman. You mean that? In fact, in a place where I worked for many years, this is the one, the big boss, I was at a university, the department head was talking to him about the truth. He said, whoa, wait a second, we got a clergyman for that. We don't have to know any of that. It's like we hire a consultant. He tells us everything we need to believe or do or whatever. So, but cut out the middleman, cut out the clergyman. A dependence on the scriptures themselves, and this would awaken resistance from the Protestant clergy to increase their authority or power, etc. Well, if we look again at Elijah in 1 Kings 19, 7 and 8, after the destruction of the priests of Baal, the rain comes, you've got truth being proliferated. Elijah feels like he's being threatened again. He goes and hides, and then 1 Kings 19, 7, the angel of the Lord comes to him and says, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. He says, arise, eat and drink, and he went in the strength of that 40 days and 40 nights, 1874, 1914, 40 days, to Mount Horeb, the Mount of God. So the Lord's return, this strong meat. Now you notice that the 2,300 days, that's about the cleansing of the sanctuary. But the Lord's return, that's in Daniel chapter 8. But the Lord's return is based on the Jubilees. It's a totally different set of scriptures. Totally different set of scriptures. Showing the Jubilee is accurate both through the law and the prophecy. If you understand how to put those together, they both go to 1874. So here was this meat and dew season provided by the returned Lord to the faithful and wise servant who was going to disseminate that. Well, at this time, Michael had stood up, Christ's presence, and the truth is purified. And one scripture I really appreciate is the Malachi 3:3, and he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. You notice, and then he'll purge the sons of Levi. But first, he purifies the silver. And we know in the tabernacle, silver is a picture of truth, of reality, of verity. The truth is going to be the sickle that's going to be used in the harvest. That's what's going, and those who are spirit begotten have a deep understanding of the truth because of this heritage of deep Bible study. When they hear these truths, it's going to make sense to them. They say, that's the truth. In fact, the ministers had said about Brother Russell, why doesn't he go down to the bars and the Boweries and the slums and, save souls down there? The folks in our churches are fine. They're already been saved. Well, the ministers didn't understand what the harvest was. It was for those who were already spirit begotten. It was those who were wheat already. For them to realize it's time to get out of those churches. Your relationship to God is no longer through some church. It's through the ransom blood of Christ. And that was the key doctrine. So come out of her, my people. Well, in Daniel 2:34, Daniel is about Daniel's image. And the contemporary Jewish Bible, I really like this translation. It says, as you watched, now we would normally say, well, the stone cut out of the mountain without hands. But it says, as you watched, a stone separated itself without a human hand. Now that's exactly what happened. Those that are spirit begotten, they saw these truths. They say we're finally putting the scriptures together in a way that makes sense. And they're the ones that made the decision to leave. Nobody said drug them out or whatnot. They're the ones that made those decisions. So, and of course, the Revelation 18:4, come out of her, my people, that you receive not of her sins, that you partake not of her sins and receive not of her plagues. Well, these plagues in Revelation 16, 1 through 16, they were intended to bring the kings of the earth to Armageddon. That's what that is telling us. Well, these plagues were poured out to weaken Christendom, this church-state system in Europe, pictured by Daniel's image. And I appreciate Brother Russell's definition of Christendom, and on the first volume, page 254, where he says, as we shall presently see, the stone is the symbol of the true kingdom of God, and Babylon substituted an imitation of stone, clay, so that the feet were smeared with clay, sort of a camouflage, really to make it look like this was the church. This clay, which has united with the fragmentary remains of the Roman Empire, and this mixed system, church and state, the church nominal, wedded to the kingdoms of this world, which the Lord calls Babylon, confusion, presumes to call itself Christendom, Christ's kingdom. And that's what they were selling in Europe. That's what Europe is all about, divine right of kings. So in the sixth plague, in Revelation 16:13, I saw three unclean spirits. This is after the river Euphrates was drying up, so the support was waning. Revelation 16:13, and I saw three unclean spirits. A spirit is an influence, a pneuma, like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. Well, the dragon was the civil power represented by the kings, and I appreciate all the kings we saw go away in the last hour. This is good. The beast, papacy. Papacy was, certainly church state. And then we have the false prophet, the vitalized image of the beast. Vitalized image of the beast. Well, so we're going to talk about that just a little bit. I appreciate in reprint 5, 10, and 11, Brother Russell talks about what these three unclean spirits are: the divine right of kings, the authority of the clergy, and that mankind is bound to submit to these and be controlled by them. But they have to submit and be controlled. That's based on, what do you believe? Well, that's what they were fed. That's what the churches, what the kings were telling them. Well, back down in 1912, the forward, 1912 forward to the fourth volume, Brother Russell mentions, applying these characteristics to the picture given in the divine word, we learned that from the civil power and from the Catholic Church and from the Federation of Protestant Churches will go forth these same teachings. This, what was the image of the beast, the Evangelical Alliance, this confederation, they were selling the divine right of kings in Europe. So and he goes on to say the divine authority of the church and the divine right of kings, aside from the church, will not be allowed to conflict. Well, I was looking at this. Kaiser Wilhelm, we had a picture of Kaiser Wilhelm with his mustache on the sides there. And I found a very interesting article about the state, the war, and revolution. And what happened, when he's talking about what was happening in World War I. And he's saying that with the churches were the key propaganda arm of the monarchy. And speaking of Germany and Kaiser Wilhelm, he said, the evangelical churches, for the most part, inculcated in the faithful the correct attitude to the state. They did this by incorporating the state into their religious teaching to such an extent that they became the preparatory schools of the nation. Protestantism has to be regarded as an essential element binding a large section of the population to the monarchy. This is what was happening, this divine right of kings. To the extent whatever the Kaiser did, it says it would always be to implement God's inscrutable will. And they use the phrase Gott, for all those who speak German, Gott mit uns. That means God with us, because we have this king, we have the Kaiser. So once brought to Armageddon, now this church-state system would be broken. Once it's being brought to Armageddon, what is the purpose? It's to break it. So the Elijah vision on Mount Horeb would then come to pass. And I appreciate reprint 5753. This was written in August of 1915, where he says, Bible students understand that these four great features of God's plan portrayed to Elijah have already begun a fulfillment. The present European war is the letting loose of the four winds of heaven, the winds of strife. And I appreciate Brother David had talked about winds. The world realizes this, winds of war. In reprint 5771, he's talked about the winds have been let loose. January 1st, 1916, reprint 5829, says Bible students are convinced that the Great War now started in Europe is the beginning of that great trouble which the Bible calls Armageddon. And the last reprint that Brother Russell, that was published in the Towers, talks about Bible students see this great time of trouble already beginning in the letting loose of the four winds of strife in Europe. Well, if this is the case, this means the sixth plague must have happened and the seventh plague was commencing. Well, if we look at the 1 Kings 19:11, Elijah is up there. He sees this great strong and wind. It's renting the mountains, and Brother David told us all about how these mountains were being rent. You know, politically, the kings were losing it. And after that, an earthquake, and after the earthquake, a fire, and after the fire, a still small voice. Well, that wind rending the mountains represents the present war, Brother Russell was saying. And this great earthquake, a social revolution. And he had went on to say, in reprint 5629, this revolution it'll come very soon. In fact, it could be even during the war. Well, Bolshevik revolution was in 1917. Other revolutions followed that. And why did they have these revolutions? They realized that the kings themselves, the kings and the divine right of kings, that is the problem. We've got to get rid of this. This is not the way human beings should be controlled. In fact, there was a mutiny in Germany during the North Sea. Sailors were ordered to go fight this one last desperate battle in the North Sea against the British Navy, which had the biggest navy in the world. The German sailors realized this is just a suicide mission. You know what? We're not going to do it. So on November 3rd, there was a mutiny. By November 9th of 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm's abdicated. It's over. So it's really amazing how all these things were taking place. So this great city was divided into three parts. The dragon, the beast, false prophet, they're no longer amalgamated. They can't be preaching the same thing, divine right of kings. The kings are gone. The kings are on their way out. So we have this revolution, and the third demonstration was a great fire, this great fire of anarchy. Now, I know that some who feel anarchy is everybody's going to have clubs and knives and guns and be shooting each other and etc. I don't see it that way. I think anarchy is when people say there's a breakdown of government, we don't have to obey these laws, these are unjust laws, and you find that in our society. We find different levels of anarchy, but I think most reasonable people, they would like to have an orderly existence. There's no impulse to just go ahead and pick up weapons and start beating each other. But the anarchy is a loss of confidence in government and the unwillingness to obey laws. And I think we've been seeing that in many, many ways. In Revelation 16:20, after this seventh plague, where the city is divided in three parts, and every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. Well, the mountain, this was the kingdom. A mountain is a large mound of rock and earth surrounded by land, surrounded by the earth. So here's the king supported by the religious society. But what an island is, it's essentially flat, and it's surrounded by the sea, by the irreligious, turbulent masses. And why are the islands fleeing away? Because they can't satisfy the needs of the people. And the people realize, inherently, they should realize that fallen men were heading up governments to please a whole host of other fallen men. It's just is not going to work. Well, where is the United States in all this? Well, in reprint 5854, Brother Russell, there's a little section called Our Fair Land, where Brother Russell says, the Daniel's image of governments, in Daniel 2:31, pictures Babylon, Media, Persia, etc. He says, it's upon the feet, this Armageddon is on the feet of that image that the Armageddon crash of God's kingdom is pictured as falling, grinding the entire image to powder. America is apparently not included in this picture directly. But of course, because we have folks from those, of course, it's represented indirectly because our population is from the countries. But the winds of strife are not needed here to weaken the kingdoms preparatory to the fall, for we have no kingdoms. Very reasonable. Very, very reasonable. It was a European picture. Well, will the churches return to power? And this is the last thing, and then we're going to get on to what our actual assignment is. In this 1916 forward of the fourth volume, Brother Russell says, well, all these kingdoms, he realizes he's writing this in 1916. He knows about the war. He knows what's been going on. And they're financially weak, and one reason is because it was a trench warfare. It's absolutely stagnant. They're pouring millions and millions and millions and millions of money in there. But what were they achieving? I mean, over a year or two, they might lose or gain 100 yards. Trench warfare, it's stagnant. It's really just meant to deplete all the resources of the kings. Nobody really won the war. But all the kingdoms financially weakened will realize the necessity for keeping a dominating grip upon the public and preventing anything akin to socialism and anarchy. That is the number one threat to any king, socialism. Oh my word, we can't have that. They'll naturally look to the great religious institutions called churches, because that's their propaganda arm, to support them, to threaten the people with future torments, and in general to help keep the ship of state from being overturned. So what was the ship of state when Brother Russell wrote that? Well, he died on October 31st, 1916. The ship of state was the divine right of kings in Europe. The United States did not even enter the war until April 6, 1917. This had nothing to do with this country. It's only indirectly as the different nations of the world did commerce with the kings of Europe. So Brother Russell really could not be talking about the United States because the U.S. hadn't even been in the war as of yet. So the ship of state was the divine right of kings. That's what it was. Daniel's image was being destroyed, and the kings didn't want that to happen. Well, if you're going to be motivated by threatenings of future torments, you have to have some belief in future torments. Does anybody here believe in future torments? No. Well, of course you don't. But people were losing their belief in these future torments. And when the kings went away, and apparently this didn't happen, will it happen? Well, Christianity in Europe is at the all-time low. There are a lot of articles that said this is the new dark continent. I mean, the churches, the cathedrals, they're bars, they're museums, or they've been converted. They just don't work. Okay. Now, with the regathering of Israel, we'd like to talk about that. In Jeremiah 30, verse 3, and I appreciate Brother David talking a lot about that. That in Jeremiah 30, verse 3, the days come, etc. I'll bring again the captivity of my people, and it says, I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. Jeremiah 33, God says, I am going to do this. He didn't say, well, I'm just going to sit back and see what happens. He says, I am going to make this happen. Amos 9:9, I appreciate he says, I will shake them through the nations like corn is sifted through a sieve, and not a grain will fall to the ground. The ones that are supposed to get back, they're going to get back there. They would be restored to their own land. In Jeremiah 16, 14, and 15, it'll no longer be said, the Lord God liveth that brought the children out of land of Egypt, but brought them into their own land. I'll bring them again into their own land that I gave to their fathers. And then God said, here's how I'm going to do it. Here's how I'm going to do it. And reprint 3855 is really good. He says, God will not only drive Israel out of other nations with pogroms, etc., where they had driven them, where they've been scattered, he will see the proper time that they shall return to their own land. And in Jeremiah 16 and 17, he will send for many fishers, they will fish them, and for many hunters, and they hunt them. Now, what does a fish do? Somebody was talking about fishing. Oh, it was in the elevator today. Well, what does the fisherman do? He hangs out bait, and the fish come to it. Hey, fish, you want this? Come on. So Palestine's being opened up. We have the Berlin Congress, 1878. They can own land again. So Petah Tikva, Gate of Hope, it's opened up. And those who really have faith in God's promises, they're going to be there. And yes, there will be desert and swamp and malaria, but they're going to keep going because they believe these promises. So that's great. But would that get everybody? No. Well, we have many Jews would leave Russia and they go down to Europe. Some would get comfortable there. Well, he would also send hunters. Well, what does a hunter do? Well, if he finds you, he kills you, right? That's what a hunter does. So it's as though God is saying, you know, how you respond is up to you. You can either go easy or you can go hard, but you're going to go. This is going to be reestablished. And by 1941, when the Nazis stopped emigration from Germany, over 60,000 had gone back to Palestine. That's what God was looking for. They went to other nations, they went to the United States, but he was saying, okay, it's time to get out. Time to get out. So they had the responsibility to respond. After all, in Psalm 137, it says, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its cunning. If I do not remember me, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. I mean, that's what, are these just words, or are you going to show this with your life? Are you going to show this with your life? So they had been scattered in Ezekiel 36:9. They'd been scattered from among the heathen, but they're going to be brought back. So this is just really amazing. We have the vision of dry bones in Ezekiel 37, this regathering. And I appreciate it says, and he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered and said, O Lord God, thou knowest. In other words, God, it's your plan. You're going to make this happen. And that's what he was saying. You know, those bones, we know that they're hopes. In Ezekiel 37:13, it says, you shall know that I am the Lord. He's saying this to Israel, the living generations. When I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves. Now, he's not talking about literal graves where there are dead bodies. He's talking about the nation. The nation is dead. It doesn't exist. But I'm going to open your graves, and you people, you're going to become a nation again. So this is not literal graves, but this is the national death of the national non-existence, which was coming to an end, and this should have infused the natural Israelites with faith in God's promises to them. Well, gradually they assume their national existence. And one thing that I thought was really amazing, when you look at the end of World War II, Japan knew that they were defeated as of July of 1944 because Saipan fell, Tinian fell, and now they could do long-range bombing to the Japanese mainland. And they did that. There was Operation Meeting House. They firebombed 16 square miles of Tokyo. They firebombed all these cities. With B-29s, they fly higher than the fighters could possibly get to them. And Japan was just saying, okay, when's it finally going to end? They knew they were lost, but the army still was crazy. They wanted to fight on. Well, what to do? well, I think the Lord overruled that on August, Operation Meeting House with the firebombing had taken place. But on August 6th and 9th in 1945, there was a demonstration given to the world of what an atomic bomb could do. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. And now the rest of the world knew the ultimate military power is possessed by the United States. That's the only time nuclear weapons have ever been used in a war. Wow, between 1945 and Russia got the bomb in 1949. Well, what happened in between there? Well, UN Resolution 181 was passed on November 29th, 1947. The United States, one of the key proponents of it. And I'm sure they said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll vote first, and then everybody else will know what to do. By the way, we're the ones with the atomic bomb. So, I think this was an influence the Lord permitted, so the Resolution 181 would be passed. It was passed 33 for, 13 against, and 10 abstained, and including the United Kingdom abstained. Wow. So, only time nuclear bombs were ever used. So, they become a nation. So, going back to the Ezekiel 37, they're brought together, the bones are brought together. And finally, but not yet, they'd been infused with the Spirit of the Lord, the breath, the energy, the national life. They'd finally be able to, the Spirit would be put into them. The Spirit, I will place you in your own land, then you'll know that I have spoken and performed it. So they will know this. But I appreciate Matthew 4:4, man does not live by bread alone. Well, they were regathered in unbelief, as Brother David said. They don't really believe the scriptures. They're going back, some because they believe the promises, but many, many more go of expediency. I mean, when the hunters are hunting you, the prey leaves because of fear. There's a fellow in our engineering department, he was from the former Soviet Union. He said to me, Harry, fear is the only motivator. Of course, he's from the former Soviet Union. But fear is a powerful, powerful tool. Okay. Well, Ezekiel 38, it seems that Ezekiel 38 has been going on in several different, has been going on for a long time. You know, the final feature of it, I don't think is finally taken place, but if Ezekiel 38, 11, and 12, when the ones who see the wealth there, they say, we're going to go up to the land of unwalled villages, to those who are dwelling safely or confidently, all of them dwelling without walls, having neither bars or gates, to take a spoil. Now, many times the enemies of Israel have wanted to do that. You know, the Arabs have wanted to do that. And they wanted to wipe them off of the land in 1947, 48. Many, many other times, 72, etc. So these tendencies of the enemies, that's been going on a long time. Exactly dwelling without walls, I've talked to a lot of brethren about that. What exactly does that mean? Dwelling, does that mean no government? What exactly does that mean? I haven't gotten something where I can put all those things together. If you can, please help me out. Gog and Magog, again, lots of ideas about who they would be, but the ones who were enemies of Israel. But what's all this for? I think is very important when the God says, very similar to some of the things Brother David said, that my fury will come up in my face in Ezekiel 38:23. They shall know that I am the Lord. In other words, God will be sanctified in the defeat of the enemies of Israel. He's going to bring those enemies against Israel, defeat them, and that's going to be something to give the faith to Israel. So when we look at Israel, it's not just a final deliverance, but a frequent deliverances to establish their faith. God is showing his deliverance in those defeats. And if you go back to the plagues in Egypt, why did you have this hard-hearted Pharaoh? I mean, it would have been much easier if he's a nice guy and said, "Oh, you want to go? Sure, well, there you go. Yeah, have a good time. Here, take a couple other things with you." No. Israel had no faith. They had just been told you have to make bricks without straw. Moses goes in and says, "Great news. We're going to go to the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God will be your God. You'll be his people." And they hearkened not unto Moses for anguish of spirit and cruel bondage. They had no reason to believe. So you've got this hard-hearted Pharaoh, and he is going to defeat Pharaoh with these plagues. And what he had said 4 times, says, "I will multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt." Why? So you'll believe. "I will show you my power." Exodus 10:1, that I might show these my signs before him. Exodus 11:9, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. So when you finally get to that last plague, the death of the firstborn, Israel's paying attention. They're believing. They got the message. So I think in the defeat, these sequential defeats of the enemies of Israel, Israel gradually, very gradually, is coming to the kind of faith that they should have. Micah 7:15, this is according to the days of thy coming out of the land of Egypt, I will show unto him marvelous things. So God in his deliverance is showing this. Well, it's interesting that in September 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza. They said, okay, it's all yours. And rather than taking advantage of this tremendous infrastructure that they were left with, they put Hamas in control. They turned the whole thing into a dump, into really a slum. And they take all their wealth, and all they want to do is destroy Israel. In October 7th, 2023, Gaza invades Israel. They take hostages. We're very familiar with that. The 300 drones on April 13th and missiles were shot down. This is miraculous. 300. I think one got through. But it fell into the sea. The wind got it. I mean, and this is a tremendous thing to give faith to Israel. God is fighting for us. Well, in Psalm 83, with the Haggarenes, this is a contemporary Jewish Bible. This is Psalm saying, God, don't stay quiet. Don't be still. Help us. He says, because your enemies, the enemies of Israel, they're causing an uproar. They're raising up their heads. And in verse 3, it says, they're craftily conspiring against your people, consulting together against your treasure. Come, and they're saying, come, let us wipe us out of the nation so that there's no more Israel. And you've heard from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's what they want. They're raising their heads. They got worldwide propaganda funded by Iran, and money's coming also from the United States. In fact, we'll get to that in a second. One thing that was interesting to me, if I saw this in the news 10 years ago, it was quite amazing. Biden, he calls a meeting of the prime minister, Biden had called a meeting of Jews on Rosh Hashanah in 2014. And he was saying, I remember when I was a younger man, I was talking to Golda Meir, and Golda Meir said, Israel's got a secret weapon. And he thought, oh, great, you're going to tell us about your nuclear capability. And Golda Meir said, our secret weapon is we have no place else to go. We have no place else to go. This is our land. So Biden continues and says, hey, folks, it's nice that things are good in the United States for all you Jews, but that may change. There may be anti-Semitism, and the United States may not be capable to protect you anymore. And the place you would have to go then is Israel. Now, if some government official said that to me, I'd say, oh, then why should I pay taxes? The number one responsibility of the government is to protect its citizens, and you're saying, I don't really even belong being a citizen? This is like the Nuremberg laws in 1935 in Nazi Germany, where they said, oh, all you Jews, you're no longer citizens of Germany. You have no rights to anything. That's essentially what Biden, whether he knew it or not, that's what he was telling them. The Obama administration in 2016, they sent $400 million to Iran. And then in September of 2016, they followed it up with $1.7 billion to Iran. Gee, I wonder what Iran's used that money for. Look in the news. And September 18th, 2024. Oh, that's just what, 3 days ago. Senator Bernie Sanders is preparing several resolutions that would stop more than $20 billion of U.S. arms sales to Israel, because Israel's a sovereign nation, but they don't have the right to even defend themselves. Well, the world is not seeing that God has returned favor to Israel. I think in Jeremiah 30:14, where it says, "And thy lovers have forgotten thee." If you continue on, it says, "For I have wounded thee with the wound of an enemy, with the chastisement of a cruel one, for the multitude of thine iniquity, because thy sins were increased." Well, that seems to be talking about during their period of disfavor, their 145 years of disfavor. And the politicians and world leaders are looking at the Jews as though it's 200 years ago. You have no standing. You have no standing. We owe you nothing. So the only place, really the only place for a Jew would be in Israel. That's the safe place. University presidents, you've seen it in the news. 4 of them have resigned, or 1 retired, because of the permitting anti-Semitism. Well, if you continue in Psalm 83, the tabernacles of Edom, Ishmaelites, Moab, and the Hagarenes. So persecute them with thy tempest and make them afraid with thy storm. That's kind of what's been going on lately, to a degree. Psalm 83, verse 18, "That men may know that thou, whose name alone is Jehovah, art the Most High over all the earth." And some of them are starting to realize that. The God of Israel is the one true God. Israel would be regathered in various states of unbelief. If we look at the political motives of the politicians, we'll bypass that. But I think the most important part of what I want to talk about in the last 7 minutes here is, what are our personal responsibilities? What are our personal responsibilities in our consecration? Because in the last days, perilous times will come. People will be lovers of their own selves, without natural affection, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. We can see that everywhere. In fact, you can't even go to a gas pump, especially in Chicago, and get gas without some TV screen blaring at you. Lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. In 2 Peter 3:10 and 11, "See then, all these things shall be dissolved. What manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness?" That's why we're here together, to build one another up. And he continues to says, "Beware lest ye also, being led away with the error of the unprincipled, fall from your own steadfastness." So we want to keep our principles strong and help one another do that. We also know that all that will live godly shall suffer persecution. Now, you may not think of that as a prophecy, but yeah, that's true. Now, the persecutions are much less. I know when I talk about the truth to other people, a lot of them, they don't care. 1 or 2 may, but we're the children of the light, the children of the day. Therefore, let us not sleep, but let us watch and be sober about the things that are happening. We want to let our light shine. Now, the adversary, he still wants to get us. Ephesians 6:12 through 17, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, spiritual wickedness in high places." And I think it's important for us all to realize that the main way the adversary gets to us is through our fleshly desires, whatever they may be. They may be good things for a perfect man to desire, but we've sacrificed even the will of a perfect man So how does the adversary get to us? He says, oh, you want this? Let me show you how you can do that. Do that. But if we essentially keep the flesh dead, it's like, and you've heard this before, go out to a graveyard, pick out any grave you want, spit on it, swear at the guy, kick over the gravestone, and look at the response you get. You get nothing because he's dead. We want our motivations to come from the new creature, not from the desires of the flesh. And some things are tough. You know, I know when there's a disrespect, that's tough. For me, for others, I don't like that. Or insults, don't like that. But I know someone almost 2,000 years ago, he suffered a lot of disrespect too. But he's all of our pattern. So, we have to keep this whole armor of God and withstand. If we suffer with him, we'll reign with him. that we could be glorified together. We're told in Daniel 12:10, the wise shall understand. Well, oh my word, the knowledge of the truth that is in this room and on Zoom and the brethren around the world, I mean, this is actually absolutely incredible. The wise shall understand, and a lot of English grammar has fallen away. But what that means, the wise shall understand. That's the emphatic form. The normal form would be the wise will understand. But God is saying the wise shall understand. They will know this because I'm going to make sure they're going to know it. So we have this wonderful. In Philippians 3:20, for our citizenship is in heaven. We're not trying to affect the government or the political nonsense that's going on out there. We have to fulfill our part in the sin offering. Be thou faithful unto death, and I'll give thee a crown of life. And if children, Romans 8:17, and if children, then heirs of God, and joint heirs, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. And 2 Timothy 2:12, if we suffer with him, we shall also reign with him. I appreciate Luke 7:13, short verse. Remember Lot's wife. Well, Lot's wife, she came out, said, it was kind of neat in there. And she looked back. Well, I was in those churches, Presbyterian Church in York, Pennsylvania. I knew how black and dark and lifeless it was. Never want to go back. Never want to go back to anything like that. And then we also have the general craziness. And it made me think of Genesis 16:12 about Ishmael. He'll be a wild man. His hand will be against every man. And there are a lot of wild Ishmaelites out there. I mean, all over the world, just wild people. The Arab Islamic violence, and Golda Meir, when she said, peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us. I mean, they're willing to have more children just so the children are there to be killed as martyrs. That's why they have children. I mean, it's unbelievable. Wokeism, we won't go into that, but folks who feel disenfranchised and they just want. They don't know what, but they want something. As far as anarchy, well, let's defund the police. We don't need them. Riots in Baltimore, riots in St. Louis, things being burned, looting. Don't stop them. We don't want to make them mad. And one last thing about the craziness. I went to high school in York, Pennsylvania. There are 3 high schools there. One of them, not the one I went to, but there was the Satan Club who wanted to have a club in this high school. And they sued. The high school says, no, you can't do that. So they sued. They won, and the high school then had to pay them $200,000 and permit the Satan Club in that high school. How about that? So, a lot of in the Satan Club, it says pro-empathy, pro-justice, and pro-rationalism. That's what it says. Well, what it really is, rebellion against anything that they think would restrict their fallen human passions and liberty. But if we look at what is liberty for, just another 20 seconds. In 6th volume, page 378, in the Law of the New Creation, he says, the perfect law of liberty is not appropriate to the evilly disposed, but to the well-disposed. It's only for the perfect. That'll be the end of the millennium. Mankind can't handle liberty. Last thing I want to say is Psalm 76:10. You look at all the crazy things that have been going on, you kind of would think, I think of when the ark was taken. You know, Eli falls over, the ark is taken. Was God upset? Did God say, oh my word, the ark's taken? No, not at all. Not at all. He was in control of everything. He was going to bring it back just the way it was supposed to. But it made me think of Psalm 76:10. Surely the wrath of man shall praise thee. The remainder of wrath shall thou restrain. Brethren, the bigger the problem, the more you appreciate the solution. And mankind's going to appreciate the solution when it's finally apparent to them.